seems to me, was an extraordinary goose that laid the golden egg. You had workers that you didn't have to pay, and you owned their children as soon as they were born. It's a preposterous system. All you have to do is visit one of the huge plantations in Virginia or South Carolina to see the wealth that flowed.
At Shadwell, a tobacco plantation in the Piedmont region of Virginia, two young boys are growing up together. Jupiter was born a slave. The other, Thomas Jefferson, would one day be president of a new republic. Jupiter was one of more than 60 slaves who sustained Jefferson's family.
A new generation of black people, of slaves, is coming of age. These are people who are born on this side of the Atlantic. These are people who know how to operate within the society.
When Thomas Jefferson went off to study the classics, Jupiter was trained to be Jefferson's personal valet. That training would include sophisticated lessons in psychology and power.
Certainly, as he grew up, one of the things that he was going to have to learn is that a boy who is his same age, Thomas Jefferson, is going to grow up to be his owner, is going to grow up to be his master.
He came to understand something about the politics of that world. The word liberty, of course, would come to be used much in the years that followed, and his own owner, Thomas Jefferson, became a great merchant of the language of liberty. Jupiter understood that as well.
Jupiter's status and work conditions were privileged compared to most other slaves at Shadwell. But for all of them, including Jupiter, it would be endless work from sunup to sundown and beyond.
All of them also would have experienced a punishment. The cutting off of ears, the kind of contraptions that are placed around people to prevent running away. All of these torturous weapons are realities that enslaved people everywhere would have experienced.
Jupiter, like any child, would also have to deal with the fact that while his parents have authority over him, their authority is secondary to the authority of the slave owner. He might have to witness his mother being schooled by her owner. He would have to watch his mother being punished, being whipped, or being raped.
In this lopsided balance of power, slaves found ingenious ways to resist the master. Some subtle, some overt, some suicidal.
Arson was one of the primary forms of resistance because it was hard to track. Poisoning was another. Running away was another because you were literally stealing property from the master if you ran away.
A runaway ad in 1746 describes 16-year-old Stephen thusly. He has been much whipped, which his back will show. Another ad describes Peter as Virginia-born, running away with iron shackles on his legs.
Day after day, slaves are refusing to obey. They are saying, listen, we have our own lives. We will not go that far. We will not submit totally.
Slave and master knew each other well. Using this familiarity, slaves constantly tested the boundaries. They negotiated with their masters for more time to work on their own gardens or to sell and trade produce they cultivated.
It would seem that somebody who's a slave would have no power and would have nothing to negotiate. But slaves found that they could negotiate. They danced the dance of domination and subordination.
One of the most profound forms of resistance was the preservation of African religions, values, and beliefs.
What it did is create an internal universe which is separate and apart from and beyond the control of a white master.
Yet, something else was emerging.
The first generation of American-born descendants of Africans are really in the process of creating something that has a very strong link to Africa, but which is really quite new.
On plantations, new African arrivals mixed with American-born slaves to shape a new culture.
The Jefferson family may have a violin from Europe, and someone plays that fiddle. Jupiter's family from Africa knows how to make banjos. In fact, Thomas Jefferson himself writes about how the banjo is an African instrument. Originally in Africa, they often made it using a big gourd. So this complicated coming together of different cultures, not just Europe and Africa, but varieties of West African cultures. On any given plantation, any given young person like Jupiter is experiencing all these forces.
For Jupiter, growing to adulthood, it was a double life. When Jefferson went off to college in Williamsburg, Jupiter accompanied him as his valet. When Jefferson went to court his future wife at her father's plantation, Jupiter would find his future wife enslaved there. They would all end up at Monticello, Jefferson's mansion in rural Virginia. As slaves began forming extended families, the slave quarter became the center of family life.
They, like any other human beings, free or unfree, 1,000 years ago or today, have the emotions of any other people. They fall in love, they hate others, they develop friendships, and how to do this within the milieu of slavery simply made those very human realities more difficult and more challenging, but they existed.
Networks of love and affection and connection between the enslaved have got to be really crucial to surviving the experience of slavery, to surviving it on an emotional level as well as a physical level.
But in the creation of those families, it gave their owners yet another weapon to force them to behave in the ways that they wanted.
What this community then becomes is the foundation for an internal slave trade where these children and these families will be separated in the future.
It's almost unimaginable, the tragedy of seeing next of kin simply removed, disappeared, shipped somewhere else. The sheer mind-boggling, excruciating situation of dealing with arbitrary power on a daily basis, not knowing when you wake up in the morning whether the family will be complete when you go to bed at night.